They say every family has secrets, but I never imagined mine would try to erase me from existence with a missing chair. The castle looked like something out of a fairy tale, perched on a quiet Scottish hillside, draped in soft mist, its stone walls bathed in candlelight. Golden chandeliers sparkled above a long banquet table dressed in white linen and crystal. String musicians played Vivaldi near the fireplace, while guests in silk gowns and tailored tuxedos sipped champagne. And yet, somehow, amidst all the perfection, my chair didn't exist. I stood at the head table, scanning the place cards with growing disbelief. 20 chairs, 20 carefully written names, none of them mine. My fingers curled tightly around the clutch in my hand, its beating digging into my palm. A slow hum built in my ears, part confusion, part fury. Julian noticed first. He rose from his seat, glass in hand, and gave me a half smile. "Strange," he said lightly. "There must have been a mix-up with the seating chart." And then came the voice I knew too well. "Oh, I'm sure it was just a miscommunication," his mother, Celeste, said sweetly, her accent curling like satin ribbons around every syllable. "We didn't expect such last-minute changes, but I'm certain someone can bring another chair." She turned to a waiter with a graceful wave of her hand, like she was fixing a folded napkin. "Nothing to see here. Keep smiling." The guests chuckled softly, murmured behind their glasses. I felt their glances slide past me like invisible darts, some curious, some amused, some clearly pitying. I didn't sit. I didn't smile. Instead, I took one slow step back from the table, then another. "I suppose I was never part of the plan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside my chest. And with that, I turned around, heels clicking sharply against the polished stone floor, walking past the marble pillars, past the portraits of long-dead Fairchild ancestors, past the illusion of inclusion. I didn't look back. Let me tell you something about me. My name is Grace Bennett. I'm a brand strategist. I've helped Fortune 500 companies redefine their image, pulled legacy fashion houses out of obscurity, and turned startups into household names. I built my firm from the ground up with nothing but a laptop, a second-hand desk, and the belief that image is power. But authenticity is everything. I'm not the kind of woman who gets overlooked, not in boardrooms, not in business, not in life. Or so I thought. I met Julian Fairchild at a TEDx conference in Berlin. He was speaking on AI innovation in the tech sector. I was consulting for a Scandinavian fashion brand. We bumped into each other during the after-event cocktail hour. He spilled Prosecco on my notebook. I laughed. He apologized profusely. The kind of meet-cute that seemed pulled from the script of a Netflix rom-com. He was intelligent, charming, grounded, at least on the surface, a founder, a CEO, a rising star in British tech. But it wasn't just his accolades that drew me in. It was the way he seemed genuinely interested in my work. He asked thoughtful questions, challenged my thinking. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, not just for what I could do, but for who I was. Our relationship moved fast, passionate, ambitious, electric. We dated across continents for months before he invited me to London to meet the family. I should have known then. The Fairchilds were old money. The kind of aristocratic British wealth that didn't flash gold watches or private jets, but let their linen, art collections, and surnames speak for them. Their estate in Surrey felt like Downton Abbey with a VPN and a wine cellar stocked for apocalypse. Celeste Fairchild met me in a lavender Chanel suit and a smile as tight as her facelift. "So lovely to meet you," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "Julian's told us so much about you. American, aren't you?" I nodded. "Oh, we do love your country's optimism." Over dinner, she asked questions with the precision of a prosecutor. Where did I go to school? Was my family in finance? Had I ever considered transitioning to a more domestic-friendly line of consulting? I told myself she was just protective, a bit traditional. Surely she'd warm up once she saw I wasn't some flighty American interloper. Spoiler, she didn't. Instead, she offered unsolicited comments about my outfits being a bit sharp for family functions. She introduced me to friends as Julian's very modern girlfriend. And when we attended a gala in Mayfair together, she told the photographer to crop it closely to keep the image tight. That image, apparently, had no room for me. Julian, for his part, said all the right things. She's just set in her ways. She'll come around. This is just how she is with new people. And I believed him. Because love makes you believe that a little more patience will eventually buy you a seat at the table. What I didn't realize then is some tables are set to remind you exactly where you don't belong. When Julian proposed to me in a vineyard in Tuscany, sunset, ring, string quartet in the background, it felt like the beginning of something grand, like the moment the gates finally opened. We decided to host our engagement celebration at Castle Lorne, a Fairchild family property in Scotland, where generations had toasted everything from military promotions to royal appointments. I offered to help plan it, not because I needed the spotlight, but because I knew how to deliver a flawless event, and truthfully, I wanted it to go right. Celeste insisted she had it handled, but slowly she let me handle the lesser parts, the vendor outreach, the transportation, the RSVP logistics, just enough involvement to make it look like I was part of it, but not enough to actually own any of it. Still, I did it. I coordinated every moving part to perfection, double-checked contracts, and ensured no detail fell through, except, apparently, my name. Now, standing outside the castle's grand hall, the music fading behind me, I realized something with a clarity I hadn't had before. That chair didn't disappear. It was removed, deliberately, calculated. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message, and I had just received it, loud and clear. But what Celeste Fairchild didn't know? I'd received messages like that my whole life, and I never, ever left them unanswered. So while they raised glasses inside, celebrating an engagement built on appearances, I stepped into the mist, pulled out my phone, and started crafting the kind of message they would never forget. Before there were castles and champagne toasts, before I found myself walking out of a banquet meant to celebrate my own engagement, there was just me. A cramped apartment in Boston, a vision board duct taped to the wall, a second-hand laptop perched on an IKEA desk that wobbled when I typed too fast. That's where Grace Bennett Brand Consulting was born. Back then, I wasn't anyone's plus one. I wasn't seated at the back of galas or shunted to the kids' table during family dinners. I was in boardrooms and war rooms, pitching ideas that made headlines and helping brands tell stories worth listening to. My work was respected. My voice carried weight. CEOs took notes when I spoke. I was building something real, something mine. So when Julian Fairchild walked into that post-conference dinner in Berlin and asked if he could buy me a drink, I wasn't looking to be rescued. I wasn't looking to be chosen, I was already whole. And maybe that's what drew him to me. Julian had that rare mix of charm and quiet ambition that made people lean in when he talked. He was polished, confident, and almost unsettlingly calm in every room. The kind of man who didn't fumble his words or check his phone mid-conversation. He was present, and in those early weeks, so was I. We spent 2 months dancing around time zones, work schedules, and growing feelings. Long texts at midnight, random flowers at my door. Video calls where he'd fall asleep still listening to me talk about a campaign I was obsessed with. He told me he respected my work ethic, said he admired how I took up space. At the time, I didn't realize how ironic that statement would become. The first time I visited his family in Surrey, I dressed carefully. Not too corporate, not too casual, not too American. A neutral Max Mara dress, classic heels, pearl studs. I'd Googled their family before I arrived. Fairchild Holdings. Generations-old diversified investments with a history of philanthropy and quiet influence. I was determined to show up as myself, but polished. Their estate was everything you'd expect from a family like theirs. Rolling lawns, staff in pressed uniforms, a sitting room that looked like it hadn't been touched since the Edwardian era. Celeste met me at the front door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and a tone that felt like a compliment but landed like an insult. "You're very grounded," she said after our first dinner, swirling her wine, a nice contrast to all the socialites Julian's dated. Grounded. The word clung to me for weeks, like I was a plant, something you stake in the dirt so it doesn't grow too wild. From the beginning, I saw the subtle distinctions between their world and mine, the inside jokes that only worked if you went to Eton. The casual references to art dealers and ski lodges and people whose names weren't followed by LinkedIn bios but titles. When I was introduced to their family friends, it was always as Julian's American girlfriend. She's in marketing, I think. Every time I tried to elaborate, I was met with polite nods and quick pivots to other topics. Country estates, board appointments, horse breeding. It wasn't that they were cruel. It was that I was invisible, like an accessory, tasteful, temporary, and easily replaceable. Julian never mocked me or dismissed me, but he also never corrected them. Never said, "Actually, Grace runs one of the most in-demand consulting firms in New York." Never challenged his mother when she said things like, "Well, darling, of course Grace is successful. She's American. You all have such wonderful drive." Instead, he'd place a gentle hand on my lower back and offer me a glass of wine. Always the peacemaker. I told myself he was just trying to keep the peace. But peace shouldn't require silence. When he proposed, I said yes because I thought he saw me. Because I thought love would eventually bridge the gaps between my world and theirs. And in small ways, it did. Julian flew to New York often. He attended my panels, met my team, and once even co-led a brand strategy pitch for a sustainability startup I'd been working with. We were strong, stronger, I believed, than the shadows that came with his family name. Still, there were cracks. Celeste never once mentioned our engagement publicly, not in her social columns, not at her fundraisers. At a private dinner for one of Julian's tech launches, she introduced me to the Chancellor of Cambridge as a dear friend of the family. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Julian noticed. He apologized later, whispered in the back of the car, "She just doesn't know how to deal with people like us." Us? I thought. There's no us if you can't stand beside me. As the engagement celebration approached, things escalated. Celeste insisted on planning the entire event at Castle Lorne. A family tradition, she called it. I offered to help. She said, "No need, dear. Just show up and look lovely." I should have said no, but part of me, some tender, foolish part, still hoped she might come around, that if I showed her my professionalism, my attention to detail, my understanding of her world, she'd finally see me not as an outsider, but as a partner in her son's life. She didn't. Instead, she handed me scraps of logistics she didn't want to deal with: guest transport, dietary requests, floral vendors. Just enough to keep me busy, but nowhere near the decision-making table. It was a pattern I knew well. Give her the work, keep the credit, smile for the camera, fade into the background. I'd seen it in business. I'd seen it in men. And now I was seeing it in the man I thought loved me enough to protect me. The night before the event, I found an open iPad on the table in the drawing room. Julian's, I assumed. I hadn't meant to snoop, but a name on the screen caught my eye. Camilla Cresswell, Julian's ex-girlfriend. The one who'd studied abroad with him at Oxford, the one Celeste still referred to as lovely Camilla at every possible opportunity. The message preview was short but piercing. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I still think we would have made a perfect Fairchild couple. My heart dropped. I didn't open the thread. I didn't need to. I already knew. I was a placeholder, a strategic piece in a family portrait I was never meant to be part of. And the next day, when I walked into that glittering castle and found no chair with my name on it, I understood. They didn't forget me. They excluded me, deliberately, calculatedly. And they did it believing I would sit quietly, smile anyway, and disappear quietly into the background. But I had spent too long in strategy rooms learning how systems work. Now I was ready to dismantle theirs, one move at a time. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about slow exclusion, about the subtle ways people erase you from their lives without ever lifting a finger. It doesn't come with slammed doors or shouted words. It comes with careful omissions, a miscounted chair, a name that vanishes from the guest list, a conversation that quiets the moment you walk into the room. You start to question yourself before you question them. Maybe I misheard. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe I just need to be more understanding. That's what I told myself, again and again. And that's how I ended up engaged to a man who watched me disappear, bit by bit, right in front of him. 3 weeks before the engagement party, Julian and I were in the back of a chauffeured car heading to dinner with his aunt in Chelsea. I'd just come from a call with a client in Singapore, and I was trying to shift out of work mode and into fiancé mode, a skill I'd been fine-tuning like a second language. Julian looked over at me and said, almost absently, "By the way, Mom's made some changes to the guest list for the party. I think she bumped a few of your invitees to make room for extended family." I blinked. "Which invitees?" He pulled out his phone and scrolled. "Not sure. Some colleagues of yours, I think. Terrence? And someone named Mina?" "Mina runs my EU team," I said, jaw tightening. "Terrence is my operations director." He looked up, surprised. "Oh, well, they're still invited, just not to the seated dinner portion." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "So they're good enough to fly to Scotland," I said slowly, "but not good enough to sit at the table?" Julian shrugged, adjusting his cufflink. "It's not personal. My mother just didn't want to overcrowd the family section. Family section. As if I was hosting a wedding for Buckingham Palace instead of celebrating a relationship that was supposed to be ours. I turned to the window and didn't speak for the rest of the ride. He didn't notice. The next morning, I received an email from the event florist, someone I had personally sourced and scheduled, since Celeste insisted the family's preferred designer was out of touch. The email read, "Hi Grace, Celeste Fairchild has confirmed new floral specs for the event and said all further approvals should come from her directly. Please confirm this is correct." It was the third vendor that week to tell me I'd been replaced as the point of contact. I responded simply, "That's correct. Best of luck." I remember staring at the screen afterward, my hands still on the keys, wondering how I'd gone from being the architect of this celebration to a ghost haunting the margins of it. Later that week, I brought it up to Julian over dinner at our favorite bistro in South Kensington. "I feel like I'm being slowly cut out of my own engagement," I said calmly, too calmly. The kind of calm that comes right before a dam breaks. He sighed, putting down his wine. "Grace, you don't have to be in charge of everything." "This isn't about control," I replied. "It's about visibility. I don't care if your mother wants ivory roses instead of blush, but when vendors start telling me I'm no longer involved, when my team is being bumped to the sidelines, it's not about taste. It's about erasure." He leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "You always think people are trying to erase you. Maybe it's not that deep." And just like that, I felt the entire foundation shift beneath me. He didn't get it. Worse, he didn't want to. A few nights later, I woke up to find him in the living room, laptop open, whispering into his phone. He didn't hear me approach. The only reason he even noticed I was there was because his voice suddenly stopped when he saw me. I asked, "Everything okay?" He closed the laptop. "Just work." The tone was off, too short, too defensive. I nodded, went back to bed. The next day, I checked the shared iCloud account we used for event planning. It wasn't my proudest moment, but what I found confirmed what my gut had been whispering for weeks. Emails between Julian and his mother, one thread titled, "Engagement Management, Final Steps." In it, Celeste outlined a transition plan. Grace's duties reduced post-party. Media announcement drafted by her PR firm. A potential speaking engagement for Julian in Rome. Solo. A line near the bottom of the email took my breath away. "Let's keep her involvement minimal until the exit can be softened. Best to handle it quietly. No drama." Exit. Softened. I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being phased out. Like a failed product, a PR liability. And Julian was on the email. Not just copied, but replying. Discussing logistics, approving timelines, no questions, no resistance, no hesitation. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the times I'd downplayed my instincts, all the times I'd stayed quiet in the name of diplomacy, grace, harmony, and suddenly I realized I wasn't in a relationship. I was in a campaign to make me invisible, to dilute me, to shrink me down into a version that could be managed, then removed. I wasn't just being excluded from a table, I was being written out of my own story. And they expected me to accept it, smile, stay gracious, disappear. But they forgot one thing. I build stories for a living, and I knew exactly how to rewrite this one. They say every great con has two ingredients, illusion and complicity. The illusion that everything is perfect, and the complicity of those who know it's not, but say nothing. That was my engagement. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. The engagement photos taken on the Amalfi Coast, me in a pale blue silk dress, Julian in a perfectly fitted white button-down, laughing into the sun as if no shadow had ever touched us. The Tatler mention of our upcoming celebration at one of Scotland's most exclusive family-owned castles. The article didn't mention the part where Julian's mother edited my bio from brand strategist and founder to marketing consultant. Nor did it include the fact that I wrote the entire press release myself, only to find it had been rewritten without my name. Less is more, Celeste had said breezily, like we were trimming hedges, not identities. And Julian? He'd shrugged. It's just PR. It doesn't mean anything. But it did. To me, it meant everything. Still, I kept showing up. I met with the caterers to refine the menu, removing shellfish for Julian's uncle, adding vegetarian options for my team members who, at this point, I suspected wouldn't even be allowed near the dining room. I sourced the wine from a vineyard I'd visited during a client retreat in Bordeaux, one known for sustainable practices, something I thought Celeste might actually admire. She didn't. "These are charming," she said, scanning the wine list like it was a takeout menu, but perhaps a little provincial. Then she handed me a printout of her own selections, all overpriced bottles from her trusted French distributor, with a margin so ridiculous I knew it had less to do with quality and more to do with name-dropping. That's when I understood. This wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't even about Julian. This was about image, about control, about narrative, and I, smart, successful, American-born Grace, was the wrong character in their generational fairy tale. They didn't want a partner for Julian, they wanted a prop, something attractive, accomplished, but ultimately silent. And if I wouldn't play that role quietly, they'd rewrite the script without me. 2 nights before the party, I received a call from Ava, my executive assistant back in New York. She was calling late, which was unusual. "Grace, I thought you should know," she said, voice low and serious. "We got a strange inquiry today from someone claiming to be with Fairchild Holdings. They asked for access to your internal financials, under the guise of doing family due diligence." I froze. They said it was to ensure your business met the reputational standards of the Fairchild name. It wasn't just offensive, it was strategic. They were gathering data, positioning themselves, preparing for something. I thanked Ava and hung up, my hands shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. I scrolled through every email, every vendor contract for the engagement party, every reservation, every invoice. Every single one had my name, not Celeste's, not Julian's, mine. I had booked the castle. I had paid the deposits. I had liaised with every supplier. They may have thought they owned the narrative, but I had built the stage. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and slipped into the castle's service wing. It was a part of the property I knew well, one I'd explored weeks earlier while reviewing the layout with the event manager. No one noticed me there, because no one ever notices the woman doing the work. The floral designer was setting up in the East Corridor. I stopped beside her. "I need you to make one change," I said, smiling. "Swap the centerpieces for the welcome dinner. I'd like the white orchids replaced with blue thistles." She blinked. "Thistles? The Scottish national flower," I said. "Resilient, sharp, not easily uprooted." She nodded slowly. I could tell she didn't understand, but she would. They all would. Later that afternoon, Julian walked into our suite, clearly agitated. "Did you cancel the private helicopter for the guests arriving from Geneva?" I did. Why? Because it was unnecessary, environmentally reckless, and, paid for with my company credit card. He didn't speak. He just looked at me like I'd broken some unspoken rule of the Fairchild family handbook. But I was done playing by their rules. The final crack came just hours before the welcome dinner. Julian was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't mean to look, but I did. A text flashed across the screen from a number saved as Camilla C. "Do you think she knows yet?" Another followed. "You promised we'd make the announcement after the party. Don't back out now." My breath caught. Camilla Cresswell, the one his mother adored. The one with a lineage deemed more suitable. The one whose Instagram still had old pictures with Julian captioned, "Sundays with Soulmates." I opened the thread. Dozens of messages, plans, conversations, promises. A trip to Tuscany in April, 2 months before Julian proposed to me. Mentions of timing the transition carefully. And one photo I'll never forget. Camilla holding a sonogram. The caption, "Our little legacy." My vision blurred. My lungs forgot how to breathe. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't even cry. Instead, I forwarded the screenshots to myself. Then I deleted the thread, placed the phone exactly where I found it, and walked into the bathroom like nothing had happened. Julian turned, water beading on his skin. "Hey," he said casually, "can you hand me a towel?" I did, and I smiled, because now I had everything I needed. They thought they were planning my exit. But they had no idea I was already halfway out the door, with the truth in one hand and their empire in the other. Castles are strange places, so beautiful they feel unreal, like sets built for fantasy. But the truth is, they were built for power, for defense, for spectacle. And that night, Castle Lorne had never looked more like a battlefield dressed as a ballroom. The chandeliers sparkled, the champagne flowed. The welcome dinner for our engagement weekend had begun. Guests mingled in cocktail attire beneath stained glass windows. The staff moved in perfect synchrony, hors d'oeuvre passed. Strings played softly in the background, and every moment unfolded with curated perfection, except one, mine. I arrived last by design, hair swept up, a navy silk gown that caught the light with every movement. No jewelry, no distraction, just presence. Celeste was already mid-conversation with the Duchess of Marlborough when she spotted me. Her smile tightened. "Grace, darling, you look elegant." "Thank you," I said smoothly. "So do you." She wore Dior, of course. Diamond earrings that could pay off a mortgage. Julian stood near the head of the long banquet table, laughing with 2 family friends. He looked up and saw me. His smile faltered, just for a second, but I caught it. Because he knew. He knew I knew. He just didn't know what I was going to do about it. The dinner began with a toast from Charles, Julian's father. A stiff, rehearsed welcome followed by vague anecdotes about honor, legacy, and enduring tradition. Then came Celeste. She stood with the confidence of a woman who had been managing rooms like this since before I was born. "It is a joy," she said, voice honeyed, "to welcome so many friends, family, and distinguished guests to celebrate Julian's next chapter. We are thrilled to have you all here in this special place, a Fairchild home, filled with Fairchild memories." Polite laughter, soft applause. Then she added, eyes flicking to me for only a split second. And of course, we're grateful for all the effort from those who helped make this weekend possible. Not Grace, not the bride-to-be, just those who helped. I raised my glass anyway, because I knew what was coming next. When the first course was served, I waited. The clink of silverware, laughter rising again. And then halfway through the second course, just as the room began to settle into its rhythm, I stood, gently, deliberately. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't bang a glass. I simply placed my napkin on the table, looked at the head of the room and said, "There seems to be a mistake." Every head turned. Julian blinked. "What kind of mistake?" "My seat," I said. "It appears to be missing." A low murmur passed through the room, the kind that happens when a tightly wound performance suddenly starts to unravel. Celeste leaned forward. "I'm sure someone can bring another chair." "I'm sure someone could," I said evenly, "but that's not the point." Julian stood. "Grace, let's not—" "I'd like to say something," I interrupted, turning to face the room. And just like that, silence fell. "I want to thank you all for being here," I began. "Truly, this weekend was meant to celebrate a union, a future. But it turns out I've been the only one treating it that way." Julian's eyes widened. "Grace, I organized this entire weekend," I continued, my voice calm, every syllable razor sharp. "I booked the venue, the vendors, the chef, the music, every detail. From the wine to the napkin folds passed through my hands, not for recognition, not for praise, but because I believed in the story we were telling." I turned to Celeste. "But I forgot that some people don't build stories. They manufacture illusions, and when a real woman steps into their frame, they treat her like a flaw." The color drained from her face. "I've been excluded from decisions, erased from narratives, and treated like a guest at my own engagement." I looked at Julian now. "And if that wasn't enough, I've also been lied to, disrespected, replaced." Gasps fluttered around the room. He tried to speak. I raised a hand. "No, don't explain. Not here, not anymore." I stepped back from the table. I've spent years helping brands tell stories that align with truth, that reflect who they really are. But tonight I realized this isn't a love story. I glanced around. It's a cautionary tale. And then I smiled, not bitter, not angry, free. "I won't be staying for dessert." The walk to the exit felt like stepping out of a burning house that only I could see. Every cell in my body vibrated with clarity. Once outside, I crossed the gravel courtyard in silence. The air was cool, fragrant with late summer roses. A black sedan waited at the edge of the drive. I opened the door, slid in, and pulled out my phone. I opened my inbox. Drafts folder, subject line, Fairchild Weekend. Final instructions. It had been ready for days. With one click, I hit send. The email went to every vendor, every point of contact. Cancel the remaining events. Withdraw all payments authorized by Carter Bennett Consulting. Cease service immediately. And then I opened my banking app. One by one, I reversed the charges. Every reservation, every floral arrangement, every bottle of wine. Julian and Celeste would be left with a very public mess and a very private bill. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to erase me. They didn't understand the cardinal rule of illusion. Never try to cut out the architect, because when the scaffolding falls, the whole castle comes with it. By the time the dessert course was served, the Fairchild family learned that the yacht tour was canceled. The media photographer, gone. The private concert, disbanded. And the final Sunday luncheon at the Edinburgh estate, replaced by a handwritten note on the garden table. No story is beautiful when built on a lie. Grace. Silence used to be my enemy. Now it was my ally. The morning after I walked out of Castle Lorne, I woke up in a quiet hotel suite overlooking Loch Lomond. No frantic texts, no PR calls, just fog curling across the lake like a white silk sheet. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the world go still. I was no longer the woman being prepped, powdered, and posed to fit someone else's narrative. I had burned the script, and the echoes were just beginning. It didn't take long for the aftermath to catch fire. The first call came from the castle's event manager. "Ms. Bennett," she said, voice tight but professional, "the Fairchilds are seeking clarification." "I'm sure they are," I replied, sipping calmly. "They're unhappy about the cancellations." I smiled. "Let them be unhappy. You canceled everything." "Yes," I said, "everything I paid for." Silence on the line, then a quiet, almost impressed, "Understood," click. By noon, my inbox was full. Emails from confused vendors, then panicked assistants, and finally a string of passive-aggressive messages from Julian. "Grace, what are you doing? You're embarrassing all of us. This isn't how adults handle things." And then, "My mother is furious," followed by, "You're ruining my career." I didn't reply. I was busy, forwarding screenshots of his affair with Camilla to my attorney, uploading bank statements from our joint accounts to my secure cloud, reviewing the non-disclosure clause in the investment documents Julian had asked me to sign 2 months ago, the ones I hadn't signed. They had tried to turn me into a liability, but I had become a witness, and a very well-documented one. By mid-afternoon, I heard from Ava, my assistant back in New York. "You've gone viral," she said, half laughing, half panicked. "What?" She sent a link. Some cousin or guest had posted a TikTok clip from the dinner, just 10 seconds long, but enough. It showed me standing beside the grand table, calm and composed, delivering the now infamous line, "This isn't a love story, it's a cautionary tale." The clip had already hit 2 million views. Narger Castle walkout was trending. Suddenly, I wasn't just a woman who canceled a party, I was a symbol. The press followed within 48 hours. First, gossip blogs, then Harper's Bazaar, then Forbes Women. They called it the most elegant exit in modern high society. Of course, the Fairchilds tried to spin it. An official statement went out from their family PR firm. "Miss Bennett is a talented individual who made a personal decision to step away from the spotlight. We wish her well." It was laughable, but necessary. Because behind the scenes, they were scrambling. Their brand took a hit. Their partners asked questions. Investors grew cautious. And Camilla, she was photographed crying in a cafe by a Daily Mail photographer the following week. The headline read, "The other woman who never got her fairy tale." I didn't smile when I read it, but I didn't feel sorry either. Julian showed up in New York 5 days later, unannounced, uninvited. I opened the door to my penthouse, freshly moved into, entirely mine. He looked wrecked, unshaven, hollow, like a man who'd lost control of a carefully manicured world. "I just want to talk," he said. I folded my arms. "Talk." He stepped inside, looking around like he didn't recognize my new space, probably because it wasn't built around him. "It didn't start out that way," he began. "Camilla, my mother, the party, it got out of control." I said nothing. "I never meant to hurt you." But you did." "I panicked," he whispered. "I let them steer everything. I didn't know how to stop it." I studied him. Julian Fairchild, once so composed, so calculated, now standing in my living room like a man finally seeing himself in a mirror he couldn't control. "I didn't want to lose you." "You didn't lose me," I said quietly. "You gave me away. You traded me in for your comfort, your optics, your lineage." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'll do anything to fix it. I'll go public, apologize, marry you tomorrow." I almost laughed. "You don't get to clean up this story," I said. "It doesn't belong to you anymore." He took a shaky breath. "What do you want from me?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? Money, revenge, closure? No. "I want you to remember," I said, stepping closer, "that the woman you tried to manage, contain, and quietly erase burned down your kingdom with a calm voice and a guest list. And then I opened the door. Goodbye, Julian." The echo of his departure wasn't sad. It was liberating, because this wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. This was about reclaiming space, not just at their table, but in my life, in my narrative, and in the legacy I was now building, alone but stronger than ever. The next week, I received a call from Vogue Business. They wanted me to speak on power dynamics, reputation, and the myth of the grateful woman. "Your story resonates," the editor said, "not because you walked away, but because you didn't ask permission first." I accepted. Sometimes people think silence is surrender. But what they don't realize is silence is strategy. And sometimes it's the most deafening sound in the room. A year after the night I walked out of Castle Lorne, I hosted my first dinner party. It wasn't at a chateau. There were no white-gloved servers, no antique crystal, no string quartet, playing Vivaldi near a fireplace built to impress royalty. It was a rooftop loft in Soho, mine. The table was long and wooden, made by a local artisan I'd met at a design expo. The chairs were mismatched, deliberately so. The place cards were handwritten. The wine was poured from bottles with no pedigree. Just stories. And every single person seated around that table had earned their place, not through bloodlines or bank accounts, but through integrity, loyalty, truth. I used to believe that success looked like an invitation, a seat pulled out for you by someone already inside the room, a nod of approval, a place card with your name on it. But what I've learned, what they taught me, unintentionally, is that the most dangerous thing you can do to a woman who has worked her whole life to be seen is to try and erase her, because she won't disappear. She'll design her own damn room. After the Fairchild fallout, the clients came, not because I was scandalous, but because I had become something rarer than status, a woman who owned her story. I rebranded my firm, Bennett & Co., with offices in New York, Lisbon, and Sydney. We turned down clients who led with ego. We prioritized purpose, not performance. And we chose authenticity over aesthetics every single time. My team tripled. So did our revenue. I built a career from truth and strategy. And finally, I was doing both for myself. Celeste Fairchild never reached out again, but I saw her name pop up in a quiet news piece a few months ago. The Fairchild Family Foundation had restructured after a major donor pulled out. The new board was smaller, more diverse, less Fairchild. And Julian? He married Camilla in a private ceremony. I know because someone sent me a photo. It looked stiff, as if they were trying to pose for a narrative that had already expired. Their smiles were curated, controlled, but there was something empty behind the eyes, like they knew they hadn't actually won. Because how could they? They were still sitting at a table built on lies. I don't hate them. Honestly, I don't think about them much anymore. I'm too busy building, living, loving, yes, loving. Not in the cinematic fireworks and roses way, but slowly, quietly. There's someone new. His name is Eli. He's not a CEO. He's a high school literature teacher who volunteers on weekends and reads poetry out loud unironically. The first time he met me, he didn't ask what I did. He asked what made me feel alive. I told him, burning a story down, then writing my own. He smiled like he understood. And over time, I think he really has. He doesn't try to manage me. He doesn't ask me to dim. He just pulls up a chair and listens. And sometimes, that's all we ever needed. Tonight, as the sun dipped behind the Manhattan skyline, I stood at my rooftop window watching the candlelight flicker across the faces of people I trust. Creatives, founders, artists, women who left marriages, careers, lives that weren't built for them. We clinked glasses and passed bread and shared laughter that didn't need permission. No legacy was being protected here. No illusion was being polished. Just truth, served warm. And as I looked around the table, my table, I felt something I never felt at the Fairchild estate or in the glossy halls of their heritage. Belonging, not earned, not begged for, simply claimed. So if you've ever been made to feel like the wrong fit in the right room, if someone's ever pulled your chair away quietly and expected you to pretend it was never yours, if you've ever been told to be grateful for crumbs while they feast on your labor, let this be your reminder. You don't need their table. You don't need their chair. You don't need to rewrite yourself to belong somewhere that was never meant for your voice. Build your own. And when you do, fill it with people who don't flinch when you speak with fire. They wanted me to exit quietly. I chose to rise instead. And that, in the end, was the difference between their legacy and mine. Mine is still being written. On my terms. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.